This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by NTT. Hi and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, and my guest is Kazu Gomi, President and CEO of NTT Research. Hi, Kazu-san. How are you?
Oh, very good. Thank you. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm great. You know, we've had you on the show a couple of times before, and most recently together with Vito of NTT. And we kind of did an overview of what the IOWN project is all about. And I thought maybe we can dive into some more specifics. I know that you've had some huge steps forward in Japan with the all-optical network that you've been developing over there with some use cases with some partners. So I wanted you to maybe kind of quickly introduce IOWN, and then let's talk about some of the more recent work that's happened, that's practically happening out there with optical networks.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks for having me, Miriam, once
Absolutely.
again. All right. So my name is Kazu. I'm CEO of NTT Research, as been introduced. So let me talk a little bit about this all photonics network, which is kind of like a flagship product or the commercial services that we have launched as a part of this IOWN project. So all photonics network, as the name suggests, it's end-to-end photonics. Some people may think that, wait a minute, we have an all photonics network coming to my door through that, Comcast, AT&T, everybody's.
Fiber, right? Yes.
Yeah, fiber. So what's the difference between the two? You may wonder. This all photonics network that we have just launched is that basically pure end-to-end photonics, and it doesn't require any kind of digital packetizing in the middle. So just the wavelength kind of dedicated to your communications from your end to the other end. So what that really means is that basically you can sum up to the two things. One is that basically the whole almost infinite bandwidth dedicated to you, and also that the super low latencies from end to end. There's certainly law of physics governs for those latencies, but it's virtually no latencies between your end.
Virtually speed of light at this
point. Virtually,
right?
Yes, speed of light from your end to the other end. So, yeah.
I think what's actually really interesting, the key thing I'm taking away from here, and I think this is what my audience will, need to understand, is that until now, with electrical networks, and actually even the optical networks we have today, which are interconnected with electrical networks, like coax or twisted pair or whatever, these are all based on standards. The base T standards, right? And they're all based on packetized data, right? And so
Correct.
Obviously there are, at the time this was created, which is 50, 60 years ago now, this was the smart way to do it, in the late 60s, early 70s, when ARPANET was born. And, we had standard TCP/IP, it's a packet standard and it works really well, but we're getting to the limits now of what we can achieve. And more importantly, at the speeds we're going now, gigahertz and gigabit speeds, we're getting some serious issues with latency and, more importantly, with heat, right? Power generation from just the heat of the semiconductors, doing all this, translating between layers of optical, electrical, different electrical, conduits like coax or twisted pair, whatever it might be. So I think the key takeaway here is this network is purely optical and has its own kind of interface in terms of sending that data across the fiber in such a way that it reduces latency even further, and more importantly takes away this packetization issue in the middle that's power consuming and latency inducing. Is that pretty much what you're talking about?
I think you summed it up very well. Yes. So almost infinite bandwidth, and then almost no latencies, and without much of energy consumptions when you look at the entire big picture perspective.
So how does it look like from like a topology kind of perspective, is it the same? Is it a ring? Is it a star? Are you having to, where do you have to start finally translate back to packets so that the normal equipment can work?
Yes. So that those, yeah, at the end of the day, of course, that you want to connect to your phones, computers, and all that, the gadgets that you have, and everything is using a digital computers, digital technology, and with the packets and everything. So those things needs to happen on your end, at your premise, basically, and then you're at the other end of the promise. So there's that the minimum. Yes, that has to be involved, but the ones that the information just shoot out from your device and it goes from your end to the other end with the speed of light, basically.
Right.
So that's what happens.
And in terms of topology, is there like multiple modes, or is there a better approach like a ring or star? Or what's the best system that you've come up with for this particular tech?
Yeah, we can do multiple different ways, but the current the service that we have launched is a star
Star.
topology, basically, and we can do a bit of a. So here's the key: you can do the switching from. You can talk to not only just a one person. You can obviously everybody has to subscribe the same service, but we can switch the destinations from based upon all the protocols that we have.
And that's, I think, kind of the key, right? This switching now happens optically, correct? Like this is no
Yes.
longer done by semiconductor technology; it's done by optical technology.
Yes.
And that's crazy to me. Like I can't even wrap my head around how amazingly innovative that is.
Yeah, so that's definitely the one step in the detail in the key technology. What happens is the one light's going into your end, and then basically the same light wave coming out the other end. But it could be we can do this sort of like a switching in the middle of the network, but kind of we call it color of light you get into the network may not be the same light coming out the other end, but you are connecting with this person and then dedicated sort of like a wavelength for this
So
matter.
it's wavelength based, right? Are you literally
Yeah.
using different, which is what you're calling colors? Is this visible spectrum? Are we talking infrared?
Typically,
Both?
yes. Going to the nitty gritty detail, we usually use infrared.
Okay.
That
So
wavelength.
different wavelengths of infrared. And so you're
Right.
basically doing a lot of what we're seeing with wireless right now, where, certain slices of bandwidth are within a domain, in this case, infrared, are being used up by specific nodes, right? Basically.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's how you optimize it. And basically you're doing filtering, I guess, to switch, right? Like
Yep.
it's all optical. So instead of if you want the data to go to only this color, you have to modify the wavelength, and you can obviously do that optically, which is really what this is all about. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is.
That in many ways you're replicating a lot of what we're doing with multiplexing in the digital wireless world today, but you're doing it with a much higher
Bandwidth,
speed waveform, right?
Right.
And a different domain, which I think is really cool. How many nodes are currently or on the star, like connected to the star topology?
We are still very early stage, and then just a number of nodes, just less than 10.
Okay, like a half dozen.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, you got to
For the
start
moment.
somewhere. Remember how ARPANET
Yes.
started, right?
Yeah,
Like there
yes.
were 3 nodes or something originally. Stanford being one of them. And anyway, so tell us about the partners. I know you're working with Sony, you're working with Intel, and what part are they responsible for? How is that collaboration going with them?
Sure, absolutely. So this all photonics network is, like I said, it's a flagship of this IOWN project. So this is not the whole thing that IOWN is looking for. IOWN is, in short, of innovative optical and wireless network. So it applies to many parts of today's ICT technologies. So in the end, we want to use optical technology much more extensively in the servers or in your computers, or actually in the computation itself. In the future, we should be able to use the optical. So that's a kind of big visions. And Intel, as you can imagine, well, they're the largest chip makers in the
Yeah.
world, and they are working with us for creating that technology called silicon photonics that we can implement the optical circuits inside of
Optical
that
chips, basically.
optical chips
Yep.
and gradually one by one.
Yeah.
And Sony, well, everybody knows Sony. I hope,
Yes.
I think that there are more of application side that they're helping us. What can we do if those low latencies, large bandwidth, and technologies available? How that our world will be different.
So applications using this network, correct?
Yes, and of course that they're one of the strong play is the gaming. So they have a very strong gaming platform,
Right.
and so that's, as you can imagine, that's a usual suspect. That what's that? What's the application areas that they are looking at?
It's a great application. I mean, gaming is
Yeah.
obviously requires low latency, high bandwidth, and is quite popular in many parts of the world, including Japan. And more importantly, Sony is a huge player, pardon the pun, in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, has content, right? You know, the whole
Sure,
point
of course.
in content distribution is obviously one of the things that networking is used for. Are you also having some business use cases right now with this network?
Yes.
Okay. Can you
Mhm.
speak to that at all? Any other interesting applications being used?
Yeah, sure. So probably one of the strongest business case is that data center connectivities for that this all photonics network. As you can imagine, that there's a huge bandwidth required within the data centers, between the data centers, and this all photonics network is
Right.
really good solutions for that. So we have other partners in our IOWN Global Forum, someone like Microsoft, Oracle, VMware's, those business application, business oriented partners with us
Right.
on that. And also, other application of this technology is that how to make the server more energy efficient,
Of course. Yeah.
and then so on. So server itself. So when it comes to that our partners are extending into like someone like a Dell
Hmm.
are part of them, basically our team in the I1 side. So so that's what's going on. And again, the common theme is how to apply the optical technology more, I think, extensively, and to bring a new future for our world.
Right. So right now, switching is kind of the main application. It sounds like
Yep.
that's the first problem you tried to solve, routing and switching. And now, obviously, the next problem will be to try to create some computational, nodes that actually use optics for
Mhm.
maybe some AI or some, data processing on the server side. That way you can stay in that domain, right? That's obviously a huge challenge going forward, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Right.
Like, what's realistically a time frame you think where we'll see the first tests on something like that? Is it hard to say, or do you have an idea, right? Is it tangible at this point?
I think we will start seeing some of that. So already, like I said, that the all photonics network, end-to-end optical, we launched this service in March this year. So that's already in
So
place.
it's pretty new, actually, right?
It's still pretty new, like 2 3 months old at this point. And I think the next thing we are looking for is that the new kind of server technology we call disaggregated computing.
Okay.
So we just connect different pieces of the servers, different pieces of the server, meaning GPU, CPU, memory, storage, all those good stuff. We can disaggregate out of the same box, which is the
Right.
conventional
Because you
stuff.
have that efficiency of bandwidth latency from the
Yes,
optical network. So
right.
now you can have a computer that's essentially distributed in its basic components,
Yeah,
right?
basic components, and then
Yeah.
kind of optimize it that in terms of the resources that you allocated for your particular applications and whatever, what have you.
Or for security purposes, if your storage needs to be in a vault somewhere off-site, you can still have the compute happen in a more efficient data center, for example.
You could do that. You could do that too.
Got it.
So that is certainly the next interesting project that everybody's looking at from the hardware perspective. We are looking down a lot of the, as you can imagine, standardizations and the collaborations with the different partners required. I would say 2 to 3 years down the road that we should be start seeing that the early part of the products being available in the market. Initially for perhaps the more like a cloud players type of thing, but it's always coming from there and eventually coming down to the end user. So to get to the end user, it's going to be a little bit longer.
Of course.
Perhaps that time frame that we had to look at.
Fantastic. Well, this is a great way to wrap up. Thanks again, Kazuo-san, for being on the podcast and telling us this awesome stuff. I'm very excited about it. Like, I really love how you explain the wavelengths. This is, I think, what my audience will be able to really relate to, because I think, optical networks, when you talk about them, it seems to be such a kind of a pipe dream. And now we have some practical explanation as to how this switching works. It's very exciting. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're back with Adam Dowd. Hi, Adam. How are you?
I am doing well. And yourself?
Pretty good. What did you think of this NTT stuff? Pretty cool, hey?
It was fascinating. I did not know how much I could learn from it.
Well, that's awesome. We're actually here to talk about this phone that we've actually been playing with for 2 weeks that we have been talking about. Last week I had Narav on and we did the quote unquote podcast unboxing, which was essentially a review because, but today, my dear friends, Adam and I, who both have the phone, are going to be able to tell you about it. That means we can actually talk about things like the camera quality and stuff like that. So those of you on Patreon are probably going to see lots of video of me and Adam brandishing our devices. Brandish.
You've got the magenta.
I got the magenta, which is baller. And I don't know, I really don't understand how Moto sent Michael the blue one, unless he requested it. I'm talking about Fisher here, Mr.
Right.
Mobile. Because how do you not send the, what is it? Signature color?
The foldable guru, yeah.
When they sent it to me, I was like, I don't do a lot of video. I really don't need that. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm super happy because I love pink and purples, right? But like what? So anyway.
The magenta is so good. I mean, I got blue, which is, I've got blue with gaffer's tape on the back of it because it's slippery otherwise.
Show me that again.
Okay.
This is dope. Look at that, guys. This is how when you're reviewing a phone, you don't want to do something permanent. You don't want to spend any money.
That's right.
Gaffer's tape. And it comes off clean, which is the best.
And you can stick it to your shirt and like do whatever photography you need to do and then stick it right back on. It's beautiful. I love it. If you don't have gaffer's tape in your bag, you are making a mistake.
All right. Well, so what are your like overarching thoughts on this device? Like what is, I just want to preamble this before you dive in by saying that when I wrote my review and I gave it to my editors, they're like, how can you make this an editor's choice when you sound so negative? And I was like taken aback by that. And I reread my review and I was like, wait, I'm not negative. I found a few niggles that I focused on around the cover screen experience, like specifically some apps not working and stuff. That doesn't mean this is not magical and revolutionary, as Apple would say. And they're like, oh, we didn't understand. I'm like, look at all the positive. I use words like awesome, incredible, outstanding. Like this, to me, I made it an editor's choice, not because it's technically the best phone.
Right.
Although in its own right, from an engineering perspective, I think it is technically very good.
Right.
I think that it's mostly because from a user experience, it's a game changer, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, I summed up my review at the end of my review, spoiler alert, which is, by the way, on slashgear.com. So go check that out.
I will link it in the show notes, folks.
Yeah. At the end of my review, I summed up that, for the longest time, flip style foldables have felt like a solution in search of a problem. And I believe that in the Razr 2023, Motorola may have actually found that problem and solved it. I
think Moto kind of nailed it because they made two phones. Mm-hmm. This phone doesn't solve all the problems. It solves one kind of user's problem. I think the more like power user problem that wants a fashionable, compact. Basically, if you want a small phone flagship like iPhone mini, like Sony compact back in the day, you're going to use this phone today. This is the power compact flagship because it gives you that form factor of compactness with the front screen. And then you can even have that second. It's like two phones in one. But it's not two phones in one like a Fold book style, right? Which is much more cumbersome to use. So then they address the other side of the coin, which is there are people who don't give a crap about the front screen. All they want is essentially a smartwatch experience up there, or even less than that. Just notifications, just, call coming in. This is not you and me. And that's why they made two phones at two price points. That is genius. And I think Samsung should learn from that.
Absolutely.
I hope that they do. Anyway.
Yeah, so we've seen some rumors of the upcoming Flip 5. I mean, obviously we haven't seen the phone itself, and it looks like the cover screen is going to be larger, but I believe that Motorola will hold on to the title of the largest cover screen on a flip style foldable, because I don't think Samsung's is going to be as large. But what I'm dying to know, and what I think everyone is dying to know, is how useful is that cover screen going to be? Is Samsung going to make you shoehorn in their apps and experiences, or are they going to go take the Motorola approach and say, you've got 167 apps on this baby, go to it, go to town, have some fun?
Well, you're checking out one of the boxes in our list of items because there is rumors that Google Maps is going to be making it to the cover screen on the Z Flip 5. And to me, this means it's not just one app. Like, it would be stupid to just have one app up there, right? So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see a partnership of a bundled groups of apps from Samsung themselves and from Google themselves that aren't any app like on the Razr. There are apps that are being tweaked and optimized to run well on the cover display because their cover display is supposedly slightly smaller too, right? So here's the thing. I think that's not the solution. And I think that's why what Moto's been doing here is the solution. It's like it's universal access, right? And so to me, this is the game changer on this phone. And this is what I try to explain in my review. I'm like, the software is awesome because it's Moto. And I didn't even I only wrote one paragraph on that. My editor was like, well, what is so awesome about something? Like, it's a Moto. I don't have to explain this. I've reviewed so many Motos on this publication. This is my hot hardware review. I'm like, just look up every other Moto because I always link back to previous reviews for the software experience because they're all essentially an evolution, right? So then it's like, well, what's left? Like all this cover screen stuff. So I went at length about that. And to me, the little widgets, like the panels, they call them, they're nice, but it's not really that. To me, what they actually should have done is gone full circle. They should have given us a proper app tray. Not like this kind of half-baked app tray that you can't sort, that you have to manually, it's like basically it's like a home screen app tray where
sorting is coming, by the way. I talked to Motorola about that.
Oh, good. Because I suggested it to them after playing with it in New York. So
yeah. So one of my criticisms was if you add like a whole bunch of apps to that app launcher, but then you're like, oh, I can do this app too, and you like go back and add it later, it just kind of dumps it down at the bottom of the list.
Well, that's my point, right? So it's not really an app tray. It's more like a home screen because you can rearrange the positions and everything. And so I don't want that. I want an app tray. I want sorting. I want recent apps at the top. Like I think they kind of went halfway, and I don't understand why. Why not give us an app tray? Like an app tray that we can create in terms of content, but an app tray nonetheless.
Well, I mean, I also think that, Motorola does a ton of user research when they're developing devices like this. And I kind of wonder if maybe they just got nervous at the last minute and said, how many people are actually going to be using all these apps on the front? Maybe we shouldn't integrate the whole thing. I kind of wonder if maybe there was just a little bit of hesitancy to fully integrate, to fully embrace that philosophy, which, I mean, is it could very well have caused Motorola to kind of pull back the reins a little bit and let's not put all of our money into this one basket. I still think Motorola is going to be curating the cover screen experience hardcore, because I mean right now that's what Motorola has going for it in the foldable space is this cover screen. This is the best thing that they have going for them right now. So I think they're going to have to be doubling down on the software experience out here, because you're right, it's I would say it's like 3/4 of the way there. Like
I'd say it's even more than that. Like I think that the panels can stay the way they are. I don't really need a Spotify custom panel, honestly, because then you start going down that really weird road of like, well, what about YouTube, music users? What about Apple Music users? What about, Tidal users? Exactly. Those are the three that I would really consider. But here's the thing, right? And that's the thing, is that because it's essentially a second screen, like a proper full-on experience, when you fire up YouTube Music, like I'm a YouTube Music user, you actually get a widget there. Like you're
right.
When the screen is locked, you actually get that lock screen widget, so you can actually control it. So I don't see why they even have a Spotify widget, because even if you don't have that panel, as it were, you'd still be able to control Spotify from your front screen. So what is the issue here? Why did they even bother? Like, what does it add that it doesn't have before? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I'm sure there was some type of negotiated partnership between Motorola and Spotify that, Spotify wanted to get their stuff onto, I'm sure there was a mutually beneficial a conversation that happened there. I'm a YouTube Music user for when I actually do listen to music, but I mean, my main thing is podcasts. So I would love to have like a Pocket Cast widget or something like that.
But if you fire up Pocket Cast right now, you get to see your thing in the front, right? So that's my point. It's like, this is something that Android has addressed system-wide. We don't need freaking panels and widgets for this stuff.
Right. But, I mean, it's a way for, Spotify to get its name out there.
No, it's the same way as they have, what's the other integration they have? They have another one. I can't remember.
Google Fit.
Thank you. Well, no, Fit is a Google thing, so it's kind of baked into Android in a way. What I'm thinking more on, there was another complete third party. Oh, TikTok. Well, they have TikTok pre-installed, right? There are two apps that were pre-installed when I always do a screenshot of the app tray after I initial setup. Because I know which apps I force install when I restore from I've got this basic backup I always restore all my review phones from. It's like a clean pixel, like I trust it. There's no wonkiness there. I basically set up a phone from scratch, brand new, and it was a Pixel a few years ago. And I just installed like just a few things, set a few settings, and I said, back this up, and it becomes my universal restore for any phone to get started at. It's a starting point.
That's a great idea. Did that. I just dump everything and say, like, God, here's everything. Let's just pray. So I did that. And so I can see, after I do the full, when the setup is complete, I can see, these are the apps I put in because I remember. And then, look, there's two apps here that I didn't install, so they must have come bundled. So that's how I actually analyze how much the bloatware meter, as it were, on a device, right? Because that's something I always write about in the software section because it drives me nuts, right? So basically, if you look, TikTok's pre-installed, meaning they have the integration where when you flip the phone halfway, right? You can... like have that flex mode or flex view that they call. But also, if you have any app like Insta or TikTok or whatever that has has its own camera app baked in, right? Like, how Instagram, you can fire up and do a video recording right inside of Instagram. I never do that, but I think the majority of people do that. Like, I personally don't understand. I shoot with the camera and then I import it into whatever app I want to import it, because that way it's in my camera roll and I can use it on multiple things. But I think a lot of people who are really intense, social media, not influencer types who use different media or whatever, but I'm talking about the average Joe or Jane, are going to just, hit record in the built-in camera. And for that, they've integrated in TikTok, and I think in Insta, it's a button that lets you mirror the display in the front, right? Oh, yeah, okay.
Right. So that's the integration I'm talking about. So, there are a few integrations in here. But the only other thing that I found to be an issue with the cover display for me is also in the contacts area, right? Like, the contacts is similar to the app tray in a way, to the app panel. The contact panel lets you dump a bunch of contacts on there. But like, it's nice because it lets you pick their phone number, whether it's a message or a call. So you have these icons of people you care about, like your favorites in the contacts app or the phone app on your phone. Normally, it's your favorites there.
Right.
But the problem is the same thing. You can't sort through them when you have, like me, my spouse has 2 numbers in 2 countries. So I now have 4 icons for them alone because I have text to them on one number, call them on one number, text on the other, call on the other. Like, I think it should just be one contact, like Theo, and then it should drill down in the contacts at that point and let me pick if I want to message or call. See what I'm saying? Like,
so from what I understand, that is Motorola. I talked to Motorola about that particular panel because, like, my nervousness was if I put my wife on that panel and the phone's in my pocket, I'm going to be pocket dialing her like all the time. Because when you tap one of those contacts, it doesn't say, "Oh, do you want to call such and such?"
Yeah,
it just goes boom. So from what I understand, Motorola said that they were using a widget, like a contacts widget, as kind of like the building block for building that particular panel, and so a lot of that stuff is kind of out of their control. They really didn't have the ability to like give you the ability to sort through things or whatnot. So I think that was kind of a workaround measure for Motorola, from what I understood.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not upset about it. I just think it takes up a lot of space, that panel. I mean, the nice thing is you can remove for people who are wondering. So the panels are essentially a carousel. Think, on your Android phone, you have your home screen, and to the left, you have Google, right? Most phones. To the right, you might have another panel with some apps, shortcuts and stuff you put in. That's kind of the same idea here, right? But instead of like home screens, they're called panels. And the first one is essentially your home panel, and it has the time and the date and the weather, and then it has a row of little icons that kind of shortcuts to go directly to whatever panel you want. And then you can swipe left and right to go between panels. The first panel by default to the right is your apps. It's like having an app tray, but instead of being scrolled from the bottom up, it's scrolled sideways to the left once and you get there, right? It's on the right screen. And that's basically the setup. So, then after that, you have the contacts. I mean, this is the default, right? And then after that, I think there's a weather, and then there's a calendar widget, and they're essentially a widget. And the calendar, for example, same thing, is not very useful, right? Like, you can't tap on a contact. It doesn't open up the calendar app and bring you there, etc. Right? There's a bunch of little things like that I think could be optimized. But it's not about the panels to me. The panels, I don't actually wish it didn't exist. What I'm trying to say when I say I want a real app tray, why didn't they replicate the home screen on there? Swipe to the right and you get Google News, right? Swipe to the left and you can create another panel and maybe put some widgets on these panels and you have your own panel set up, as it were, right? It seems like, as you said, they're 3/4 of the way there because they put like this kind of like, Samsung Galaxy Z Flip like, or Oppo Find N2 Flip, widget interface there. And then we'll give you an app tray and you can run any app. And then when you're actually running apps, right, you have a task manager. You can literally kill apps. It's like a normal Android experience. I'm like, why didn't you just go full balls here?
Well, I think I want to say that it's probably an accessibility issue because the main audience for this particular phone isn't necessarily like people like you and me who's used to this kind of stuff. I think the paradigm that's out there right now is if you have a cover screen, you have widgets, and then you can operate within the scope of those widgets. Now, one of the widgets that they give you is an app launcher, which means you can launch any damn thing you want, which is great. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, what can I do with this cover screen? And I think this is a real good introduction to that. And then the nerds like you and me can go farther than that. But I would like to see, I like what you're saying is if they could just replicate your home screen on this cover screen so that you can have a widget and, an app drawer and, like you said, Google News feed off to the one side.
If you swipe from the top, you get the quick settings. It's there. When you have multiple apps running, there's either use the gesture pill or use the gesture buttons, whatever your preference is. You still have your multitasking. You have so much similarity, but then they kind of gimp it. I hate to use that word, but it's the best thing that popped in my mind right now.
Nerfed it.
They make it worse by not giving you a full app tray, by not letting you run the settings app on the cover screen. Have you noticed that?
Right. Yeah, I did notice that. That's
by not
really
letting
annoying.
you run Google Photos on the cover screen. You can't run Google Photos. But no, this is actually, I drilled down into this a little more. You can run Google Photos on the cover screen, it turns out.
Okay.
Partially. You fire up the camera and you preview a photo by tapping on look at a photo you just took, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in Google Photos.
Okay.
You'll see all the buttons are there. The edit button is there. And as soon as you hit edit, it says, cannot do that on the cover screen.
Right.
But if you try to fire up the Google Photos app, actually, if you try to put the Google Photos app in the app tray, you can't. It'll tell you it doesn't support. It's the only app I found that doesn't work, that it doesn't let you do. Have you run into any other apps you couldn't put in the app tray?
That I couldn't put in the app tray? Yes. I have like 200 plus apps that I install on my phone, and 167 of them appear in the app tray in the cover screen. So there's probably like 30 apps or something that are missing.
Do you know any of the top of your head you think are pretty important, like Uber or Lyft or something?
I couldn't find anything like super important, but I know that Google Assistant specifically doesn't work on the cover screen.
So a bunch of Google apps, basically.
There are a lot of Google apps that actually don't make the transition over. I know Google Street View didn't, and I want to say there were at least a couple of others. But I asked Motorola about that, and they said that's actually an app developer choice, that the app developer can choose to have their app not appear on the cover screen because it's not properly optimized.
But interestingly, Google Calendar specifically,
mm-hmm.
you can put it in the app tray, in the app panel, and you can run it, try that, and then your interface is borked. You can't, like the Chrome doesn't work, you don't get the hamburger menu. You can tap on an event and drill into it and edit it. Like, it's kind of half-baked. And that's another thing I pointed out. That's why my editor was like, well, all this negative stuff. I mean, did you understand? This is me niggling at this point, right? Like, I'm just like...
You're picking nits, which is fine.
That you can run anything almost. Like, out of your 100, 200 apps, you got 170 up there, right? Like, that is insane to me. Like,
it's awesome.
I only have like 50 apps on my phone, or less than that on my review units. I don't put like my banking apps on there. I'm not like, no. Like, I review too many phones. If I switch to this as my main phone, I might, but it's not going to happen in the first 2 weeks that I'm using the phone. Sorry.
Fair enough.
But it's unfair to my listeners, I guess, because I'm not really reviewing if I'm not using my whatever, Bank of America app. But
we all have our different standards. It's fine.
It's just, these are not critical to me. Like, they're like, you can do this stuff. Some people don't even do banking on their phone simply because they're like, I think it's unsafe, and they're going to use the web, which I don't know if it's much safer, honestly. But that's
fair
just,
enough.
Whatever, right? I use banking on my phone all the time for sure. But here's the thing, like, this is a game changer that you can run these apps, that you have the quick settings, that you have the multitasking, that screen capture works, everything. It's just Android. Like, there is no BS here, basically, other than a few little niggles we just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And it's a game changer because when you're running on the front screen, you have a screen that's literally half the size. It's using half the power. So your battery life benefits. It's also, you can use it one-handed. You can reach every corner of the screen on a normal hand, right?
Yeah.
And you can do it, because it's a little thicker, it fits in your hand like a pebble, basically, like, like something a little more, what's the word, like substantial than a regular phone. And as such, you're not going to drop it as easily. And like, there's so many benefits to using, like, there's still enough friction there for you to get really serious, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you can get a lot more serious than you can get with widgets. Like, you can reply to a text message. You can, fire up a Telegram message to someone. You can, do a quick little something that you need to do. You can sort through your email, like properly, like starring, like deleting, like archiving, like labeling, like the stuff that because we get so much email, and a power user that's a business person would feel the same way. It's that's what I'm saying. Like, if you don't want any of this, like, we have some of the people we know, right? Some of the journalists and creators we know, they're like, I don't get this. What's the point of this? This is why they make another Razr that's coming, guys. Mm-hmm. You're not the target audience if you don't get this. But I know that you on this podcast get this, because you want the best of both worlds. You want a folding phone that's compact, and you want to be able to use it properly on the front cover. And that's kind of, I think, what makes it. The other thing that I really like is that you have an optimized camera interface in the camera app. So the camera app on the big screen is a standard camera app from Moto. But as soon as you fire up the camera, double click on the power button, or, do the wrist gesture that Moto gives you, as soon as you do that, you get a camera app that is optimized for the cover display. So you get slightly different. I don't know if you can bring it up for a second here.
Sure.
There you go. So as you can see here, you see there's a little button, blue button to select the mode, like photo, portrait, video, etc. And then you on the right hand side here, you'll see there's a bunch of little things like settings. You can change like your resolution, the timer, and all that. But it's very simple and it's very easy to use. And if you want to take a photo, you just tap the screen, and you use the volume rocker, which is just really nice. And of course, when you're are you gonna do it?
Yeah, we're gonna do a podcast.
We're doing a
selfie
selfie
right there.
here on the Patreon, folks.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's cool, I think, and this is nothing new because like the Z Flip does all this, right? And the Oppo does all this too. It's like you can, when you use the camera app with the phone open, you can mirror the display on the back. You have all these features, so you can do a selfie with the main camera, etc., etc. Anyway, so the point is that like they've thought about all the traditional flip experiences, like all the camera, the flex view, as I mentioned before, where you open it like an L shape, and the viewfinder gets to the one side of the screen on the big screen inside, and then the controls on the bottom of the screen. Same with YouTube. YouTube is the only other app I found, by the way. Have you found any other apps that are optimized for flex view?
No, not at all.
Because YouTube does it where your video plays on one half of the screen when you're in L shape, and etc.
I like shooting in camcorder mode,
there's camcorder mode too.
With the old 90s
but
interface.
The Z Flip does this too. It's basically flex. It's flex view, right?
Yep.
So all of this is a given, guys. So you're probably asking, okay, you've talked about the experience at length. We're 26 minutes into this segment of the podcast.
Right.
Let's go through some of the hardware things. Like basically, Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. Absolutely just fine. This phone is fast, everything's slick and quick. I've noticed no issues personally. No problem. 8 gigs of RAM, just fine. 256 gigs of storage, it's all right. It could be better, but whatever. And no micro SD, you know that already. Stereo audio is incredible on this thing.
It really is
for
good.
the size and the thickness and the general form factor, and you know how much they've jammed in there. There's no extra space. This thing sounds incredible to me. Like really, really good. So, the other things I want to say are, I'm building up to the cameras, you get that. But I'm just saying, like, overall, the hardware and the design, we talked about this with Nirav, and I think on the podcast initially after our hands-on. I don't know what it is about the Flip, but the fact that it doesn't fully close, and even the Oppo, the fact that it's slab-sided more like an iPhone, doesn't have the rounded sides, this is so much easier to open because of its rounded sides.
It really is.
I don't know how to explain it. I'm not one of those people like Michael Fisher who will open the phone by flipping it, but you can see here in the video, like the sides have these rounded edges, and you can actually you can
force your thumb into there,
exactly,
and pop it open and then flip it open.
And it's so premium, like the fit and finish, the materials, the build quality on this thing is like, I would say, I hate to compare it that way, but Apple always nails this, and other manufacturers are hit and miss. Like OnePlus, some phones are great, some phones are meh. They're all good, but they're not like, there's definitely a range of consistency in the build quality from device to device, not on the same device, from new device to new device. Like you compare OnePlus 10 Pro to OnePlus 11, and it's like, there's slight differences. And, Moto has done that too, to be honest with you, on some of their cheaper phones, right? But this thing, they went all out, where I feel like Samsung is not, it's good, but it's like 90% of what the Moto gives you in terms of like the premiumness of it, the refinement of it.
I would agree.
And then if you're a stickler for this kind of stuff, this phone really nails that. And then of course, you've got wireless charging. It's very slow. It's 5 watt, no reverse wireless charging. So keep that in mind. 30 watt wire charging is okay. It's at least better than Samsung's 25 watt. It's obviously not Oppo's 44 watt, right? But here's the thing, battery life. You give it points for battery life. I felt like I had to say that it was middling.
Okay. So yeah, okay. Well, first of all, before we move on to battery life, because I think this actually ties directly into battery life, how much of interacting with the phone would you say you did on the cover screen exclusively? Like a percentage, Like, would you say you used? I know Fisher said it was somewhere between like 10 and 15% that he was using on the cover screen.
I thought he was using way more on the cover screen than the internal screen. Actually,
I thought that was really low when he
yeah,
said
me
that.
too. Like I would say that I spent I spent about half my time on the cover screen because
I was gonna
honestly,
say, yeah.
Also, disclaimer: first 2 weeks, right? So it's like
Right.
the honeymoon phase. Number one. Number two, you really want to try this out for the audience. I'm writing a review here, right?
Right.
Number three, it's a novelty of it and stuff. Number four, I already know what the main screen experience is. It's just like having a Moto Edge Plus,
an
right?
Android
Like
phone.
it's
Yeah,
great,
it's an
it's
Android phone,
fine. But it's not just Android. It's Moto Android. It's the best Android,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right.
It's better than Pixel. And don't get me wrong. There are features that Pixel has in, for example, the phone app with all the call screening and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
and the hold for me stuff. All that stuff I miss. But I'm talking about the actual pure Android experience.
Sure.
Moto nails it. But I think that's 50%. I mean, I did open the phone from time. Like, you're stupid if you don't.
have
Like,
to.
you have a phone,
have
right?
to.
It's the full-on experience. You don't want to throw that out.
So I know when I was talking to Moto, I said I was going to tape my phone shut for a couple of days just to force myself to use the cover screen.
Did you?
I dismissed that notion within the first few hours of like unboxing and setting the phone up, because there's a lot that you can't do. You can do a lot with the cover screen. I was like you. I'm probably conservatively about 50%. I want to say maybe a little bit more cover screen than open, but
Yeah.
I'll say 50% just to be fair. I wanted to tape this phone shut and just use it with the cover screen, and you just can't do it. There's just
without
some
access to
stuff
the
you
settings,
can't do
you're
it.
kind of screwed, to be honest with you.
Well, that, and you kind of need like a second phone or another computer if you want to like get other stuff done. Like I'm trying to think of like specifically, like I know there's a few games that I play that don't work well, like because they're like word games and they're like shrink down to that teeny tiny size and you can't type properly. So like stuff like that.
Right.
But as tying that into battery life, I found that while forcing myself to use this at closed 50% of the time, I never found myself unable to get through a day on a single charge, and that included a 4-day vacation in Western Illinois where there is no cell signal whatsoever. So I mean, this phone was struggling to maintain a connection in where we were staying, and I still managed to get through an entire day. I was down to a couple of days. I was down to like 5-10% before I put it on the charger. So to be real, it's not amazing battery life. I found it to be quite adequate though.
Yeah, so I feel like I agree with you 100%. Like, battery life is very variable on this phone, is what I want to say. It's like if you're using the big screen a lot, yeah, you're going to be struggling a little bit, I think. But I agree with you. I was getting a day with mixed use, and my mixed use, I'm estimating, was 50%. A day, no problem. 2 days, absolutely not. This is not a Moto Edge Plus, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Battery life on that thing was crazy baller. But also, Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 is very efficient, and these displays are OLED, and they're very efficient too. And the front panel is smaller, and so there's less to drive in pixels-wise, but also it's not LTPO. Whereas the inner panel, when you fire that up, yes, there's more pixels to deal with, but that thing can refresh at 1 hertz. So when you're like navigating just your text messages and you pause to read for a second, you're 1 hertz. You're not moving the interface. It's not doing anything. So, it's really hard. Plus, Android doesn't keep track of how much screen time you spend on the cover display.
Yeah,
so for us to test it, we weren't able to test it. Like when I run our benchmarks at Hot Hardware, which is PC Mark Work 3 for battery testing, I had to run it on the big screen. It wouldn't run on the cover screen.
Okay.
So my numbers, but in a way that's good because my numbers compare well with a normal phone, like an Edge Plus, right? So I can, or a Pixel or a Samsung. So I can actually look and go, oh yeah, okay. So I got like 11 hours and 44 minutes, which is way better than the 8 hours and a half or something I got from the Z Flip 3, for example. Because I never got the Z Flip 4 to review, so I never got to benchmark it. I can look up on a database. We have a database of hot hardware that had all that stuff in it. Okay. But I remember from my own review, like 8.5 or something to 11.5. That is a huge improvement. Now, the Z Flip 3 we all knew was limited in terms of battery life. Snapdragon 888 back then, right?
Yeah.
Smaller battery even than these Razr. But I think that is going to be really the decision you need to make. And the next thing we're going to talk about, which is cameras, right? It's like, am I a power user that all day long, like really needs that almost 2-day battery life at regular use and 1 day at CS battery life? You know what I'm saying? If you're that person, this is not your phone. If that happens to you on a regular basis, this is probably not your phone. And then there's the cameras. And I want to preface this by saying that it is better. It is better than I expected, but it is worse than the competition. As I said in my review, if you read it, I said that, the camera, if I compare them, the Galaxy Z Flip 4 is slightly better. The Oppo Find N2 Flip is significantly better. It lacks OIS, the Find N, but it has a Hasselblad tuning, it has a Mary Silicon X chipset for image processing. I think that it's still the best camera on a flip phone. But the Z Flip 4 is not that much better. You have to remember, if you're comparing this phone to a Galaxy S23, an iPhone 14, a Pixel 7, you're not comparing the right oranges to the right apples here, or whatever it's called. You need to compare this to a Z Flip 4. You need to compare this to, again, the Pixel, the 7a obviously, or the 6a are going to be much better, right? But those are outliers in their own categories. You have to compare this more like, what would a $500 phone do, right? And I think it's better than that. And I think the reason it's better than that is because of the f-stop. f/1.5 and the OIS. It only has a 12 megapixel sensor, and that's what hurts it for zooming. That's what hurts it, I think, in detail overall, because pixel binning is a real thing and lets you process sub-pixel and do all kinds of fun stuff. But overall, I think with the Edge Plus last, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, and this phone, I feel that clearly there's some image processing improvements in the pipeline at Moto. It's not quite at the level it should be at, but it's there. So what I'm saying to you is that the camera, I think, is so-so overall in the great scheme of flagships, but it's perfectly fine for the intended audience and the purpose of this phone.
I think so too. I found the camera to be, and I said in my review, it's the best camera that Moto has shipped on a flagship, but the bar was really low, and this phone doesn't do a lot to raise it. Mostly what I found was, as long as the phone is not moving, like as long as you're not carrying the phone or walking with the phone, something like that, if you have the phone set in like a stationary area and like the people are moving around it, that's probably okay. If you are doing like landscapes, it's wonderful. You know, as long as there's no motion whatsoever. When the lights, in darker environments, people moving around can mess up the photos. Not so much the video. The video actually compensated pretty well for it. My main concern was, even during the day, when I would hold the phone and walk, you could see my steps like jarring, like physically jarring the phone.
Yeah, but that's because that was phones 2 years ago. Like you're comparing, let's do a flagship, which doesn't do that anymore. But
I know.
My point is, like, this is not an easy thing to do. Like it's
not.
Even an iPhone will, if you don't have, I think maybe the 14 does it okay, but I think go back to a 12 or a 13, you're going to see that same thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Going to see that on a OnePlus 11.
Sure.
Brand new modern
not
phone.
As much. So I see it more in low light video.
Low light is terrible. Video,
but I don't
see photography, but video, right?
Yeah, and I don't see it in daylight video on any phone except for this one.
Okay.
So, and it also gets better if there is a subject in the frame that you're following, because I think then the software processing is able to focus in on that subject and say, okay, this is what we're working on, rather than this abstract, things are going past the camera lens and we don't know, what's all this stuff supposed to look at. I mean, basically what I said in my review was, if I'm Motorola, I'm putting every single dollar of R&D for the next 2 years into camera and camera processing, because everything else, and we've already touched on this several times during this podcast, everything else with a Motorola phone, the software, the hardware, the build quality, it's all great. We just need to dump money into the cameras and get those up to speed with what other flagships are doing these days. And my God, Motorola would be just in a powerhouse, and it makes me hurt so much because I want Motorola to be great. Motorola kind of like, they're a hometown company for me, but they're also, Motorola is also one of those mainstays, like one of the ones that you kind of always go back to, like, I really like using these phones, and I just wish the cameras weren't so bad. They're basically like the Cubs of the mobile world. Like, you want them to be great, and they just aren't. But especially when it comes to cameras.
Better, though. I feel like there's an improvement this year with the Edge Plus and this phone specifically that actually bring it to a usable, like, I'm not wanting to throw the phone at the wall. This is making good photos for me, for most
100%
uses.
agree. 100% agree.
So we're just being critical here compared to like the state of the art, because this is $1,000 phone. And, even, what is it, $350 right now, the Pixel 6a, I think you can get it for like really cheap,
like
is
cheap.
going to beat this thing, right? But it's the only thing it's going to beat this thing as, the reality, right? So just keep that in mind, guys, right? Like, this is the thing. This phone does so much more. So, I think as long as you keep that in mind, I think this is fine. And I'm impressed with low light photography performance, and I think a lot of that comes to physics. F over 1.5, 1.4 micron pixels on 12 megapixel with OIS. You can't, like, the hardware is set up by, default to be good. And then the image processing doesn't have to do too much work, right?
Right.
Now, night mode doesn't help a lot, because without night mode, I kind of feel this thing is a little in the weeds in terms of low light performance. It's too dark, right? Like, and then, the other things I've noticed, inconsistencies in white balance and exposure. Overexposure is a problem. The ultra wide is, the ultra wide is also the macro, so it has autofocus, which is nice to have autofocus. But here's my experience, and I keep saying this to a lot of manufacturers, especially companies that make phones with 50 megapixel, 48 megapixel, or higher cameras. You don't need to have a macro at all. You do 2x or 3x punch in, pull back, or pull in even, up to a certain point, you still focus fine. And you get this natural creamy depth of field using the main sensor. You get really a high quality, macro. I actually did a comparison. If you look in my review, look at the image gallery, which has all the images I took. And in it, you'll find 2 pictures of a Canadian loonie, the $1 coin. And one was taken with the macro, and the other one was taken at 2x with the main sensor. And the 2x of the main sensor is 1,000,000 times better, even though the macro is optimized for that kind of use. Even though this macro has autofocus, because it's the ultra wide with autofocus. So, like, I feel like they kind of missed the boat on a lot of little things like that, where, the only good piece of hardware in there in terms of cameras is the main camera. And then the image processing is improved enough that it actually makes it overall pretty good. The selfie, the front camera, when you open the phone, like the main selfie camera, it's a selfie camera. It's fine. You're better off just using that main 12 megapixel sensor, closed, and use the cover screen to take a selfie, to be honest with you. Although the field of view is different. There's a lot more of that kind of like pointy nose vibe to using the 12 megapixel than there is to use the selfie inner camera. The inner camera is optimized for faces, so it does a lot of lens distortion correction in software to make you look less, pointy nosy. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But overall, look, these are, again, we're niggling here. Like, okay.
Yes.
All I'm saying is that it's nice to see Moto make progress. And for the packaging of this phone, like how little space they had to make cameras work, I think they did the best they could. If it was Oppo or Samsung, this year with the Z Flip 5, I expect cameras to be way better.
Yes.
Like the Z Flip 4 just barely scraped along. Okay, guys, like, we keep complaining about the cameras on Moto, but not every Samsung phone is baller with the cameras. The S
Right.
series is one thing, but even the A series are, in my opinion,
and the Flip series as well.
Yeah,
definitely left something to be desired. But I mean, again, you were getting a phone that folded in half, so really didn't have much to complain about, to be honest.
Right. Any final thoughts before we jump into the news here?
So there's a couple of things that I can say. First of all, this is probably the most fun I've had reviewing a phone in a long time. I very much enjoyed my time, despite the fact that the cameras were just okay. I was actually okay with it, with the cameras not being more than just okay because of the rest of the experience.
Right.
So, yeah.
I agree with you. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think they made a phone that is the best flip phone on the market at least until next month, and
at least until next month.
But look, you got to think beyond that, because the Samsung software is never going to be as good as Moto's.
I believe you are
the
correct.
hardware is pretty great. Now, spec-wise, I think we know that Samsung's going to get an 8 Gen 2 in there. We know they're going to get better cameras, and there's no doubt there's those two things. If you want specs and camera quality, the Z Flip 5 is the one you want to wait for. But in terms of user experience, what you can do with the cover screen and the general software experience, I still think that if you're looking for a flip phone today, you should really seriously look at the Moto, because it's going to be fine for another year. Okay.
Yeah. And in terms of the Flip, I mean, in terms of the upcoming Flip 5, Samsung, the gauntlet has been thrown. So you really need to respond to this phone, because if you don't, I think that Samsung is going to be unpleasantly surprised with what happens.
And the results, honestly, are you're going to speak for themselves, because they won't have any time to change anything. That Z Flip 5 is being, pretty much dead in its tracks.
Sure,
final,
it's done. Yeah.
But also Samsung has the advantage of the retail channels, and they're going to sell, no matter what, a lot more than this Moto, right?
Right.
And that's the thing that sucks for Moto, right? But I'm just saying, for you, if you really want a flip phone, you try to decide, the Z Flip 5's coming, this is coming. If you are, wanting to wait, that's the smart thing to do. But if you don't want to wait, the things that are definitely going to be better on the Samsung are going to be the camera and the specs. But the things that are going to be better, even after the Samsung comes out, in my opinion, my gut feeling, is going to be the software experience and the software in general on the Moto.
The user experience,
if that's what matters to you, you can get that phone now and call it a day.
And if you're a T-Mobile subscriber, get the magenta, because it's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. If you like that kind of color. All right, so let's jump into the rest of the stuff we have.
Yeah.
So let's talk quickly about the Pixel tablet. I'm realizing we don't have a huge amount of time. What are your thoughts on this device? I'm going to link to the Verge's review. I'm picking the Verge here not because of anything specific. I often pick the links in my show notes based on the authors of the reviews. But in this case, I didn't find any reviews that was like, I want to pick this one over that one, right? So the Verge is generally a pretty good reference. Dan Seifert here in this case is a friend of mine. I trust him. So what are your thoughts?
So this is no hands-on experience, of course. My boss at Slash Gear is a big Pixel fan, so he kind of snapped up all the Pixels that were rolling out of Google I/O this year. So I'm a little jealous, but it's okay. I almost said Motorola. I think Google has a very interesting device here. And man, I really wish I could speak more intelligently about it, because I love the concept. I love the idea of a tablet that becomes a smart home screen. And just because of so many tablets end up sitting on a shelf when they're not being used. And that just drives me nuts. I don't know if it drives you nuts, but it drives me nuts. I want to see tablets that are useful for other things other than just being a tablet, because a tablet is such a small use case, at least in my workflow. So I love the idea that it turns into a smart home thing. I'm surprised that it took this long for Google to come up with it. The speakers on the dock sound great. The speakers on the tablet don't really. There's some questionable battery life, but I also think that if this device is meant to live on a dock, it probably doesn't matter about the battery life. But at the same time, if you're going to get a tablet, you probably want to get a tablet that you can travel with. So then battery life becomes a bigger concern. Overall, I think it's a little bit overpriced for what it is. but at the same time, you know, I like the idea of the device. I just don't have practical hands-on experience to see how it works. From what I've seen from reviews and from what I've read, you know, videos and written reviews, it seems like Google nailed a lot of it. But I also think that Google Assistant has become progressively worse and worse over the last couple of years, which is not a great thing when you have a tablet that's trying to, you know, live on Google Assistant.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here. I played with this tablet at Google I/O. I am not impressed. Okay. I don't think this is a product that matters. And I'll tell you why. Because the OnePlus Pad exists. And
wow.
Look, roughly the same price. You're actually getting it's not a specialized device. I feel like they created this to solve a problem that I don't think really exists, right? Like it's like this problem of like, you need a tablet in your home and it might as well be your Google Home or Nest Home or whatever, right? That's kind of what they went with. That's the premise.
Yeah.
It's not a bad premise. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but this is only a good idea if this thing costs $200 and is like a Fire tablet.
Right.
This has a Tensor in it, which is way better than a Fire tablet, but is also a sucky flagship processor. Sorry, guys. Okay.
Sorry, not
so
sorry.
It's going to affect battery life, which clearly it does. You know, it's got no keyboard and pen accessory. How do you make a tablet without that these days? I'm sorry. To me, a tablet is an utterly mobile device. Yes, it lives in your house a lot, but the reason cheap tablets like the Fire exist, like these other devices exist, is because, you know, you are using them.
They're Netflix boxes.
To your, exactly. You use them as the interface to your
your streaming apps.
To your world, like to your home automation world. So to me, it's like, what were they thinking? Like, this is at this price point should have a keyboard and pen accessory. Now I hear there's rumors it's coming, but it's too late now. Like you define what this product is, and for what it does, what it's supposed to do in the home tablet that watches Netflix and lets you use home automation, that docks, the dock concept is great. And it comes with it, which is also great. For this concept, it should be $299 or $259. This should not be. And I think I played with it. It doesn't feel that premium. You know, Google Android experience on Google tablets is crap. It's still crap. It's going to continue to be crap. And at least OnePlus tries to alleviate that crap with something interesting. Yeah. And I just don't like, I'm just saying, you have a pile of money in one hand and you want a tablet in the other hand, and it has to be an Android tablet. Go to OnePlus Pad. Absolutely. This does the same freaking thing way better.
I would say so, unless you're looking to, replace your Lenovo, your Lenovo smart screen, which I still have up in my kitchen.
Oh yeah,
so I need to pick up something to replace that. Probably just get a new Google Home or something. But I like what Google's trying to do. I just think that the execution was flawed, like so many of Google's projects.
And honestly, this product doesn't feel that nice and premium. Like the Pixel phones feel really good. And they've competitive. This thing looks like just a cheap piece of plastic. It's not, because it's like a polycarbonate over a metal frame or something. It's really
it's an aluminum back,
well
isn't
done.
It?
I don't think so.
Oh, really? I swear I read that somewhere.
It is aluminum covered in plastic. Kind of like, remember back in the day when the Pixel 4 came out?
Okay.
5. It was the 5. The 5.
Yeah,
remember the 5?
I remember the 5 very well.
It's that exact same. This has the design language of the Pixel 5. It feels like they started working on this back then.
They probably did.
And it finally, like, popped it out of their freaking butt, like at I/O just now.
Yeah.
And didn't really think much about it when they did it. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't feel like a thought out product. I don't get this. Like, I played with it. If it had been luxurious and nice, I would have been like, okay, great. And if it if the marketing was focused on this home tablet, and I said, but we also have a keyboard and pen because, hey, it's a tablet, it's a computer, you can use it on the go because it's a mobile device, I would have said, okay, great, you thought of it, but you're really marketing it as a home thing. I got it. I get what you're doing. But in this case, it's so specialized. No, just no. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree. There seems to be a lack of follow through. with this. Like it's
like a lot of things at Google, to be honest.
It seems like they just figured they'd stick a Google sticker on the back of it and it'll sell, because of course it will, because it's Google, because we have all the money.
Speaking of Google, I just want to point out that I finally have one of these.
Oh, hey.
The Pixel 7a has landed. Thank you to the T-Mobile folks for hooking me up. I appreciate it. Look, it's about time that I had one because, well, you know, Google's not sending us anything. So,
yeah.
Geez. Anyway, so, you know, stay tuned for my thoughts on that, finally using this phone. And then, of course, who knows when the Google Pixel Fold is coming. I haven't heard anything. I know some people have them, but whatever. We'll see what happens on that.
Yeah.
I'd love to get my hands on one. I have requested it. Let's see what happens. I have very low hopes, and I'm not spending that kind of money, folks. I'm sorry.
Yes and yes.
Right?
Agree and agree.
All right. So other news this week that are interesting. I picked a few things.
Yeah.
OnePlus V folding phone renders leak.
Oh, that looks nice.
This is the first time. It looks a little bigger than the Oppo Find N series. You know, so I've been going by the assumption, and this is before I want to preface this. I'm going by the assumption that OnePlus is going to make an Oppo Find N3. You know, their own variation on that, right?
Yeah, I was kind of working under that assumption as well.
That little compact form factor, you know, that small book style fold factor.
Yeah.
But this from the renders look like it might be a slightly bigger thing, more like in line with
the Fold.
You know, the Pixel Fold or the Z Fold, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I'm disappointed about that too, because I was really hoping for that OnePlus would go the squat method, just because I kind of I having never used it, having had no hands-on time with it, I find that I should mention I do have Z Fold experience, but I don't have Find N experience. But I find the Z Fold to be a little bit too narrow, and so I would like a more spread out feel to it. And I was kind of hoping that OnePlus would bring that, and it looks. I mean, based on these renders, this feels more Z Fold like rather than Oppo Find N, unfortunately. So I'm still holding out hope because this is just a rumor. So I'm holding out hope.
This is just a rumor, like a leaked render. I think it's true. I think it's definitely CG.
I think
but
so
it's
too.
I think it's not like. I think this came from the source because it's on leaks. That's why.
Right. Yeah, it's very credible. I like the look of the back.
I like the look of the camera pod. I like. Yeah. Let's talk about that real quick. 50 megapixel main sensor, IMX 890. That's a good sensor. That's I think the same sensor that's in the OnePlus 11 5G.
Sounds
right.
You
have a periscope telephoto of some kind, which we don't have on the 11.
Yes.
So that's awesome. You know, 32 megapixel inside, or the cover display has on the front. LTPO AMOLED, 120 hertz refresh. That's all the cover screen stuff. Up to 100 watt charging. Wow. And then 4,800 milliamp hour battery. Ooh, that's okay. But for a big screen like that, it might be a little challenging. Although I'm sure it's Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2, really? I don't think Qualcomm's going to come out with an 8 Plus Gen 2.
You don't think so?
Nah. I mean, if they do, it has to come soon because, like, my gut was that the Z Flip 5 and Z Fold 5 would be 8 Plus Gen 2. But when I had Narav on last week, he's like, no, I have heard rumors that they're not making an 8 Plus Gen 2.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Who knows what's going to happen there? Like, hold tight on that. But even if even if it's 8 Gen 2, it'll just be fine, to be honest with you. So, yeah, look, this looks hot. I'm in. I'm really trying to figure out what I'm going to do next because at this point, I think I should go folding phone. Like, book style potentially. So of course the Pixel Fold was up there for me, but then I used it and it's great. I like it. I like what I saw a lot. The cameras were solid, but it's Tensor and I'm so sick of Tensor. Like the freaking radio performance, the freaking battery life, all of that. So I'm thinking I should hold off till Pixel 8 Pro because it's going to have a new Tensor in there that I think will be better. But at the same time, I want a folding phone. So if Google's not going to send me a Pixel Fold, because I'm not buying these phones, guys, this is just not happening, I'm pretty sure OnePlus is going to send me the folding phone.
Yeah.
So unless this thing lacks wireless charging, which I absolutely want, This might just be my next phone, folks.
I could see it. Yeah, there's a strong possibility there. What I'm really excited about is the idea of the periscope lens, because one thing that folding phones typically have not had, it has been really great telephoto, and I'm a telephoto fan.
Me too.
So I'm really looking forward to that. And not to mention, OnePlus has gotten really good at cameras over the last couple of years. Like OnePlus was bad up until probably the OnePlus 9.
Well, it's because they've inherited all the Oppo stuff, right? And Oppo has a really good imaging pipeline. So
right. And so I'm really excited. This could be a really good book style foldable with great cameras, and that is very exciting to me. And I know that, as far as I know, Slashgear is going to tap me to review this. So that's my understanding at this point.
Yeah, I'm definitely reviewing this for Hot Hardware. So stay tuned, folks. I'm excited about this one. It's just a lender. It's just a leak. We don't even know if it's real, but I feel like it is. The last thing that's interesting, and I'm just going to mention this because we have to wrap up, is interesting little bit of news. Qualcomm actually reached out to me about this. Sony did not, but Qualcomm did, and said, hey, we are going to be partnering with Sony for a tighter collaboration on their phones, basically.
Great.
And so the reason I put this in is because I'm a huge fan of the Sony Xperia phones. As a photographer, for me, they really do it. A lot of people, I think, shouldn't buy these simply because they still don't have enough mash the button and get good photos
me included
going on, right?
Me included.
but that's fair. But I think if you have the money and you want a no compromise flagship and are willing to play with the camera a bit, this is a very rewarding experience. However, the big question mark was, like HTC, like LG, who bowed out of the phone business, although HTC is coming back a little bit now, the U23 Pro or whatever that was recently. The point is that they're not in the game really. The question was always, is Sony going to bow next? Because this can't be profitable. They make only really one great phone, and it's really expensive. And they can't possibly be selling many of them because they're niche. And I've always said, and this is what I think LG should have done, too. I've always said Sony can support itself from selling televisions and whatever else and completely keep the mobile business going even at a loss. LG chose not to do that, which, considering they make more money than Sony on TVs and fridges and vacuum cleaners and freaking washer dryers, I cannot believe that they didn't keep their mobile business at a loss for a while.
Right.
Until they could figure out another pivot on their marketing yet again, right? But Sony's hanging on because this partnership looks like a multi-year thing.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about it, basically.
So that means we're going to get more years of Sony phones, which is good for everybody, I think.
And more importantly, maybe there will be finally an Xperia 1 series, like the top of the line, that has a mash mode on the camera that is actually good. That we actually are going to get an experience out of that is awesome,
We can hope.
On that note, I want to wrap it up, and I want to let you tell the world where they can find you on the internet.
So normally I would say you can find me on Twitter, and you can still find my profile there. It still exists. But it's at Dead Technology, but I'm also at Dead Technology on Blue Sky and T2. I'm trying out both of them to see which one's going to stick. And Instagram, I've been doing a little bit more of that recently, a few TikToks here or there. That's benefit of the Dowd, though. But yeah, so my biggest online presence at the moment is the Benefit of the Dowd podcast, which I host with my podcast partner, Cliff Thomas, and that's on YouTube at Benefit of the Dowd, or your favorite podcast player. That's Benefit of the Dowd, DOUD, just like my last name. So come visit me at any of those social platforms, except for Twitter, because I won't bother to get back to you. But and you can find my writing on Slashgear, and coming up probably later this month, you can find me on Forbes as well.
Oh, great news. Awesome.
Yeah.
And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. So I'm still on Twitter. That's also my handle on Instagram and my handle on Blue Sky. So, look me up there. And if you want to discuss this podcast, a lot of you probably are not on Blue Sky, but since me and Adam are on Blue Sky, that would be good. Or Instagram, right? As you know, the Instagram for me is mostly about pictures. That's how it started. I know there's a lot of reels now there, but I'm a picture person. So
yeah, me too.
have pictures of phones, pictures of cars, pictures of food, pictures of travel, all taken with phones. Check out Instagram for that. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com or on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. So please subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. YouTube.com/mobiletechpodcast is where you'll find some video complements to this podcast that are separate from the video edition they get on Patreon. So on YouTube, you have some unboxings and some hands-ons and some of the other little bits and pieces. So you know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell below, all that good stuff. Comment below, comment about the podcast, comment, and Adam can read the comments too, and we'll be able to talk to you that way if you're not on Blue Sky. Finally, Patreon. Patreon is where it's at if you want to help me out financially. And there are some perks there. One of them I mentioned a few times is the video version of the podcast. You can get the podcast a day or two in advance on video. We get to see us brandish the phones. Brandish the phones. That's the best part, right? So, consider this. Patreon.com/tankgirl, patreon.com/TNKGRL. There's other perks in there. I'll check it out. There is a Discord server and a bunch of other stuff. So if you want to help me, that's the way to go. Also, there is a link in the show notes to a PayPal button. You can PayPal me $5 to buy me a coffee. You know I like my coffee. So there we go. That's another thing you can do. And of course, I want to thank our sponsor, NTT. NTT is a global technology and business solutions company providing services to clients worldwide, including more than 75% of the Fortune Global 100 and 85 million mobile subscribers in Japan. With a rich history of innovation, NTT continues to push the boundaries of the communication and computing technologies to create greater human connections. These innovations advance technologies across artificial intelligence, photonic networks, digital twin computing, quantum computing, renewable energy sources, cryptography, Open RAN, Web3, and immersive XR technologies. NTT's innovative optical and wireless network, IOWN, is an initiative that aims to build the next generation infrastructure for communications and computing using photonics and optical technology. IOWN technologies will provide higher capacity, lower power usage, and extremely low latency, enabling and accelerating future innovations. And I want to thank you, Adam, for being my guest. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for letting me come on your show and screw with you just a little bit. And don't forget, go buy some gaffer's tape. It will change your life.
Oh, there you go. That's the best advice. Always have some gaffer's tape with you everywhere. Mm-hmm. That's actually true. So thanks again, Adam. And of course, we'll have you on the show again at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another podcast next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.